Today we're going to learn some English and practice some vocabulary related to health, illnesses, and longevity with Dr. Peter Attia. Let's get started. Hey there, how's it going? Thiago here, and welcome to another episode of the Media Corner series. This is a series of videos here on the channel where every Sunday I pick a movie clip, a clip from a TV show, a podcast interview, a book, a song, and teach you some English with it. So basically, it's about learning English with a piece of media. So today, I brought a clip here from an interview that Dr. Peter Attia is giving. I really enjoy following his work. I think that his work is incredibly informative. I have personally learned a lot about health, lifespan, longevity, what it takes to get to your senior years well, not only physically speaking, but also mentally speaking. So if you don't know Dr. Peter Attia's work yet, I really recommend you follow his channel, his podcast, and I'm sure that you will learn a lot about anything related to health and living a good, healthy life. All right. But we're going to be learning some English today with his interview. So let's listen to it, and I'll be pausing, breaking down some connected speech that he might be using or some nice words that he uses and his English as a whole. So let's get started.
When it comes to someone's risk of dying, you characterize the biggest risks as the four horsemen. So could you explain what those are?
Yeah. I mean, you can't have a discussion on this topic without talking about the four horsemen, which, might seem a bit grim.
Okay, so he's using a very nice analogy here, yeah? So in order to refer to the four main causes of death among people, he uses the four horsemen analogy. So he calls the four main causes of death the four horsemen. Just to pull up some extra information here, this is something biblical, yeah? So the four horsemen of the apocalypse, as described in the book of Revelation, are conquest, war, famine, and death. Famine, by the way, is hunger, like extreme hunger, okay? So basically each horseman here represents something bad, something really, really bad. So that's why he uses the four main causes of human death. He refers to them as the four horsemen, okay? So I wanted to talk about that because, I think it's a really clever analogy that he uses here. But let me go back a little bit.
Discussion on this topic without talking about the four horsemen, which, might seem a bit grim.
Might seem a bit grim. So grim is Grim, right? Grim. Something grim is something kind of a downer, it's something negative, depressing. It makes people sad, brings you down. So, he's going to be talking about the four main causes of death among humans. So that's not like the most uplifting topic of conversation, but it's still something important for us to, discuss and be aware of, right? So even though it might seem a bit grim, it is necessary.
But there's no reason to avoid talking about the inevitable, which is every one of us in this room is not going to be alive at some point.
Yeah, that is true, right? We're all going to die at some point.
And I think to confront the how is important, right? So
really like the pronunciation here, important. Notice that he doesn't really say important, but he goes important.
And I think to confront the how is important, right?
You see, important.
So statistically speaking, all of us in this room are going to succumb to one of four.
Oh, a nice word here, yeah? Succumb, okay? To succumb is to, be defeated by something. Yeah, to be subjugated by something. So eventually, I think he's going to talk about the diseases, yeah? Eventually, as we get older, we're going to succumb to certain diseases, all right? Or illnesses.
All of us in this room are going to succumb to one of four processes or disease processes. So
disease processes. This is nice because, he's saying processes in the plural, okay? Processes is the plural of process, okay? So process is one, processes more than one. Okay?
So in rank order, the first of those would be cardiovascular and cerebrovascular disease. That's the leading cause of death in the United States.
The leading cause of death, like the main cause of death, cardiovascular and cerebral disease. That's the first horseman, let's say.
That's the leading cause of death globally. It's the leading cause of death for men, and it's the leading cause of death for women, full stop. So that's a heart attack.
Full stop, like, categorically speaking, that's it.
A stroke.
Let me go back here a little bit. He used a couple of nice words.
Cause of death for women, full stop. So that's a heart attack, a stroke.
A heart attack or a stroke. All right?
The number two, and it's not that far behind in the United States, is cancer.
Not that far behind. So we understand that, okay, cardiovascular disease is number one, is the leading cause of death, but a close number two is cancer. Cancer is not that far behind. That's what he's saying.
And of course, cancer isn't just one disease. We lump it all together. But of
we lump it all together, like we put them all together. That's what he means.
Of course, prostate cancer and breast cancer are, frankly, as different as, a pickup truck and a Corolla. They both have four wheels, but that's about where the similarity ends. Number three would be the diseases of dementia and the neurodegenerative diseases. And there's a lot
Okay, dementia. All right.
of things in here, right? So you have Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common form of dementia, but you also have lots of other types of dementia that are not neurodegenerative, such as vascular dementia. And then you have the fourth horseman is kind of a spectrum of diseases that we call metabolic diseases. The most extreme version of this would be type 2 diabetes.
You see the pronunciation of the condition, right? Diabetes, of the disease, diabetes. And he's talking about a spectrum, right? A spectrum goes from one extreme to the other, but from one extreme to the other, there are all these other, illnesses and diseases in between. It's a spectrum, right?
But of course, all along the way, you have conditions like fatty liver disease and insulin resistance. And all of these conditions form a continuum. And the most important thing to know about them is...
Say the word again, important, the pronunciation.
While not that many people will die directly from those diseases, if you have anything along that continuum, it's in...
That continuum, very nice word, yeah? Like a straight line.
Increasing your risk of by about 50% of the other three horsemen. So we really want to think about a strategy at mitigating all.
A strategy at mitigating. So when you mitigate something, you reduce the risk of something, yeah? The word is mitigate, but he's flapping the T here, so mitigate. So to mitigate the risk of maybe succumbing, you had to use his word here, to one of these diseases, yeah?
4 of these conditions and delaying them as long as possible.
Delaying them as long as possible. So when you delay something, you postpone it as long as possible, yeah? Like, if you're gonna have it, let it be like really, really late in life.
What would you say to someone that may already be navigating these chronic diseases that come with aging, and what advice would you give them on how to manage a high quality of life and keep hope during these times?
It would matter very specifically on which one we're talking about, right? So I certainly won't ask for a show of hands, but just based on...
Yeah, when you say to an audience, show of hands, you want people to raise their hands or their arms to answer something. For example, show of hands, how many people here have already played the lottery? And then people will show their hands, yeah, or raise their hands. That's the expression, show of hands, show of hands.
On the age of everyone in this room, it's impossible for me to imagine that nobody in this room hasn't already faced some of these diseases, right?
He reduced the 2 again, right, to a very common reduction in connected speech. Listen.
Show of hands, but just based on the age of everyone in this room, it's impossible for me to imagine that...
It's impossible for me to imagine. He doesn't say to imagine. It's impossible for me to imagine, but it's impossible for me to imagine. All right?
Nobody in this room hasn't already faced some of these diseases, right?
I gotta say something here because I believe he's Canadian originally. He was born in Canada. Yeah, and he pretty much grew up in Canada before going to the United States. Guys, in my experience, and I have been teaching English now for almost 2 decades. To my ears, yeah, I think Canadian English is perhaps the most clear, most articulated type of English I've ever heard. Out of all the other native accents, to me, Canadian English sounds so clear. Fundamentally speaking, Canadians speak just like Americans, like, the standard accent I'm talking about. Like if you pick standard American accent with the standard Canadian accent, they're pretty similar. Yeah, it is North American English, but I would say that a Canadian speaking English is like 10 times more clear than an American. I don't know why that is, but I just get the feeling that they articulate the words more properly. They move their mouths even more. They actually pronounce the sounds correctly, like, they are supposed to be pronounced. And even though they use connected speech as well, it's not so blended or so fast or so connected as, certain regions in the US, I would say, So maybe it's just my impression, but he's not the first Canadian I hear that makes me go like, whoa, man, this English is so clear, like so crystal clear. And I think he's a great role model when it comes to English speaking as a native. He speaks super clearly. He uses some really nice vocabulary here, like some advanced words as well. But if you want to practice your listening by listening to a native speaker, he is one of the people that I would recommend you listen to often. I sometimes get some comments here on my channel of people asking me to recommend a podcast or a YouTube channel to practice listening. I mean, listening to him is going to give you some pretty good listening practice, I think. And I think that he's a good role model when it comes to crystal clear pronunciation and articulation. I just love the way he speaks. Like, literally, he speaks so clearly. Let's continue here.
So if you're sitting in this room and you already had a stent placed in your coronary arteries, that says, look, you've already had a brush with coronary artery disease. Maybe someone in this...
You already had a brush with coronary artery disease. So when you have a brush with something, it's like, you've already kind of experienced that. Yeah, you've already gone through that situation. In this case, having some sort of artery disease, coronary artery disease. All right? This is not something new to you. That's what he's saying. You've already had a brush with it.
That says, look, you've already had a brush with coronary artery disease. Maybe someone in this audience has already had a heart attack and you're fortunate enough to have survived it. Well, the short answer is, look, the fact that you've survived it is great, and that means you get a second chance. Many people don't, right? So many people's first brush with heart disease is death. In fact,
you see, many people's first brush with heart disease, in other words, many people's first contact with heart disease is death. Like, the first heart attack a person has is usually fatal, yeah? But other people, as he's explaining here, have this brush with a heart attack, for example, but they survive, yeah?
In fact, on average, about 50% of people, 1 in 2 people that have a heart attack, it's immediately fatal.
Wow, look at that.
So if you're in that
fatal, yeah, something that kills you, yeah, it's fatal.
Group where you've had that heart attack, or somebody who has, and they've lived to tell about it, they're in the lucky camp, and what they should be doing is...
They're in the lucky camp. Like, think of maybe a camp, yeah? Like a group, in the lucky group, let's say, in the lucky camp.
Everything in their power to not only prevent it from happening again, but to strengthen their body. And so...
Strengthen their body. Very nice word, because, he's using the verb strengthen, which is the verb form for the word strong. All right? So strong is the adjective. This person is strong. But to strengthen something means to make something strong. It's the verb, it's the action, and it comes from strength as well, the noun, okay? So why do you go to the gym? You go to the gym to strengthen your body, to strengthen your muscles. In other words, to make them strong, okay?
So, the first thing I do is I ask myself, what were the conditions that I had that led to this heart attack in the first place? Now, some of these conditions you don't have a lot of control over. Genetics play a strong role here, but there are many things that can be controlled, such as cholesterol levels, blood pressure, smoking.
You see, all useful terms related to health, yeah? Cholesterol levels, blood pressure.
Those would be the big three. And we have ways to manage all of those things. Also, we know that exercise plays a very important role, as does metabolic health. So, I've met many people who have had that near brush with death from...
You see, he's using that word many times here, yeah? When you have a brush or a near brush, yeah?
That standpoint of a first heart attack, they survive it. And what do? They turn it around and they say, look, I'm going to lose 30 pounds. I'm going to stop smoking, or I'm going to manage my blood pressure, cholesterol better. I'm going to take up exercise. And I know people that have gone on to live 30 years after that.
Yeah, he's kind of talking about what I talked about in the last episode of the Media Corner. In the last episode of the Media Corner, I used a clip from Robert Greene, and he's actually talking about that. Like, the way to stop... He says the way to get yourself to do something is by seeing the necessity in it, right? So the situation he's describing here is actually that. Like, people who maybe throughout their entire lives led a life not caring so much for their health, but then they have this near brush with death, right? This encounter with a heart attack or something like that, and they almost die, but they don't. Then, like Peter said here, they turn it around, and then they start adopting healthier habits, let's say. They quit smoking, they quit, maybe over drinking, and then they start exercising, and they go on to live 30 years after that first brush with a heart attack, for example. Really, really cool. Let me just go back here to this bit.
At near brush with death from that standpoint of a first heart attack, they survive it. And what do? They turn it around and they say, look, I'm going to lose 30 pounds. I'm going to stop smoking. Or
also notice that he's not saying I'm gonna, he's saying I'm gonna. It's really reduced. Let me see if I can maybe drop the speed here so you can listen. He doesn't say I'm gonna, but I'm gonna. Let me play it back slowly. Check it out.
The first heart attack, they survive it. And what do? They turn it around and they say, look, I'm going to lose 30 pounds. I'm going to stop smoking.
You see, I'm gonna lose 30 pounds. I'm going to stop smoking. Listen again.
And what do? They turn it around and they say, look, I'm going to lose 30 pounds. I'm going to stop smoking.
Really nice. So that's a very common reduction for I'm going to. It's beyond I'm gonna. It's just I'm gonna. All right?
Or I'm going to manage my blood pressure, cholesterol better. I'm going to take up exercise. And I know people that have gone.
I'm going to take up exercise. When you take up an activity, you start doing it. Okay? So I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to take up exercise.
Gone on to live 30 years after that event that might have happened when they were 60, and they live until they're in their 90s. So I guess I would always...
Really interesting what he's saying here. Yeah? He's met many people that maybe had a heart attack, for example, at 60. And then after that, they started adopting healthier habits, and they still lived up to 90, after making that shift relatively late in life. Interesting.
Always frame it through the lens of, hey, am I fortunate enough to have survived this thing? And if so, what am I going to do going forward?
Really cool. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Media Corner. I hope you had some listening practice here with Dr. Peter Attia. And also I hope that you learned something not only about English, but also maybe about healthy living. All right? Do check out his work. It's wonderful. And I think you're going to like it. All right? Thank you so much for your attention today. Don't forget to check out my conversation club, my pronunciation course, and my private community. All the links are here in the description of the video for you to learn more about. If any of these products make sense to you, you can just go ahead and sign up. It's going to be great to have you as a student and as a member of the community. And that's about it. I'm Thiago. I'm signing off. Thank you so much for your attention today. Happy Sunday. And I'll speak to you very soon in the upcoming episode. Bye-bye.